I am a failure. Until this is healed, it does not matter what I do. It does not matter what I do. That belief keeps persisting until it is healed. Remember, it is only God that can give us his true standard, so that fear loses its authority over us. According to the book of 1 John chapter 4 verse 18, perfect love casts out fear, and that perfect love flows from God, because John chapter 4 verse 8 says, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. So the perfect love is supposed to be given to us by God, which heals fear, which heals shame. So that is how shame shapes behaviors and fear as well. I talked about the shame-based identities, for example, but I can as well list them again, but they are very many. For example, the shame leads to shame-based identities. But these are false identities and beliefs about the self, and we keep operating in them, ladies and gentlemen. For example, I am unworthy, I am unlovable, I am a failure, I am always wrong, I am only loved when I perform, for example, about this, I am only loved when I perform. Let's say I did something good, and when I did it, I was appreciated. When I was appreciated, everyone gave me gifts. Everyone was happy about me. I can internalize a false belief of the self that I am only loved when I perform. And when I internalize that false identity that I am only loved when I perform, I can become an overperformer. I can become very competitive. I can become envious at others and all those behaviors. So I am only loved when I perform. I am poor. I am poor. I am rejectable. I am rejectable. There are very many. I am not enough. I am inadequate. There are very many, ladies and gentlemen. These are some of the shame-based identities. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the shame-based identities. Another way I can explain shame. Shame is like a wound internally that a person believes they have. For example, this is a leg, my leg. This is my leg. Let's say I believe I have a wound here. This is my leg. I believe I have a wound here. This is a wound. Because I believe I have a wound, I do each and everything possible to avoid it being rewounded again. I avoid situations that might lead to being rewounded. So I avoid other people. I stop playing with people. I can as well build a structure around this wound. What is the use of the structure? To prevent from being hurt again or wounded. So I can build a structure around my leg, around the wound here. What is the use of the structure? To avoid being hurt. Because I have a wound on my leg, I build structures or a structure around my leg to avoid being hurt. I avoid some games which might lead to me being re-wounded again or re-injured. So I avoid games. I avoid some other people that might point at that wound, because when someone points at a wound, it is I feel shame, because I do not want to be ashamed, because I perceive I am flawed. So I avoid people that might tell me you have a wound. That is what shame does. We start avoiding people that might correct us, because a correction feels like an attack. Because internally I believe I am flawed. When someone corrects me, it feels like an attack, because I believe this is who I am. When someone corrects me, it feels like they are trying to change me. So that is what happens when we adopt shame-based identities. We fear correction, because when someone corrects you, for example, you believe, I believe I am unworthy. I avoid people that will tell me you are unworthy, because internally I believe that is who I am. So when someone tells me, it feels like they are attacking who I am. It feels like they are not accepting me for who I am. That is one danger of shame. So in this case, because I have a wound, I avoid those people that might point at it. Why? When they point at it, I feel shame. So I avoid correction. I avoid other people that might correct me. That is shame. Another thing is, I might start dressing up differently. I might start putting on baggy pants. I don't know if they are called baggy. Those big pants. Not because I want to, but because I want to mask this wound. I want to cover it so that others do not see it. So I start putting on those heavy pants. Not because I want to, but now the wound is influencing how I dress up. So I start putting on those heavy pants. Why? I do not want anyone to know I have something wrong. So now it is the wound shaping behaviors. That is what happens. When someone internalizes a false identity, it starts shaping behaviors, either coping mechanisms or avoidance behaviors, or behaviors that change me to be another person, so that I do not display the perceived flaw. But remember, that interpretation is wrong. It is not truly, it is not the truth that I am unlovable. It is not the truth that I am unworthy, but because of a perceived wound, the brain builds avoidance behaviors, and I start working in them, believing this is who I am. That is how shame operates. A wound starts influencing how I behave. A wound starts influencing how I walk. A wound starts influencing relationships. A wound starts influencing the kind of jobs that I do. For example, I believe I am poor. I believe internally I am poor. When I internally believe I am poor, I try to avoid opportunities that could correct me. I avoid them because I believe I am not worthy of greatness. So, because I believe I am poor, that influences behaviors. I start avoiding opportunities. I procrastinate. I start sabotaging opportunities. I avoid correction. Even when someone wants to correct me, I avoid them, because of a false belief that I internalize and carry. So that is how shame works. We are looking at shame. We are looking at fear. These two, they were activated in Eden. Man said, I was afraid, fear, because I was naked, shame, and I hid myself. I was afraid. Fear, because I was naked. Shame, and I hid myself. Before sin, man was naked and not ashamed. Before man disobeyed God, he was naked and not ashamed. He was naked and not hiding. When man disobeyed God, he knew that he was naked. He knew that he was naked. He sewed fig leaves and they made themselves coverings. When God asked, man said, I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. So we are looking at the conditions, fear and shame. You can call them emotions, you can call them conditions, you can call them states, you can call them reactions, but they are fear and shame, these two. So we have looked at shame. Now let us look at fear. Fear, ladies and gentlemen, how can we understand fear? Fear is a reaction to a perceived threat. A reaction to a perceived threat. Fear can be understood as a reaction to a perceived threat. A reaction to a perceived threat. This means a perceived threat. How we can understand a perceived threat? A threat can be real or a threat cannot be real. A threat can be real or a threat can be imagined. But when our minds perceive a threat, be it real or imagined, they fall into fear. They start fearing. When we perceive a threat, we start fearing. That threat can be real or that threat can be imagined, as long as the mind perceives a threat. Just like shame is a reaction to a perceived defect or a perceived inadequacy. For example, when someone believes they are less, or when someone believes they are below a required standard, and that interpretation is attached to identity, they feel shame. When someone perceives themselves below a required standard, and that interpretation is attached to who they are, that interpretation is attached to the identity, it leads to shame. And then fear is a reaction to a perceived threat. When I perceive a threat, be it real or imagined, I start fearing. So fear says, I am not safe. Fear says, I am not safe. So fear detects threats. Fear detects threats. It says, I am not safe. Fear says, I am not safe. A reaction to a perceived threat. It can be real, it can be imagined. For example, when I sit here just like I am sitting, and I close my eyes and I start imagining lions coming to attack me, to destroy me, to tear me, to kill me, because I know how dangerous lions are, I can start fearing. That interpretation is not real. That reaction has come from an imagined experience. So I imagine something and automatically start fearing. You can try it out where you are. Just close your eyes and start imagining lions or a snake biting you. Just sit where you are and start imagining a snake or anything dangerous and try to feel like it is real. You start fearing right away. Fear. you start fearing right away. But fear and shame were seen first in Eden when man disobeyed God. Fear and shame were activated. So fear is a reaction to a perceived threat. A threat can be real, a threat can be imagined. Now, how does this work? I'm going to give a simple example. Remember, I said I'll be using examples, I'll be using metaphors, I'll be using analogies, I'll be using frameworks, I'll be using models, I'll be using observable patterns, I'll be using studies to help us understand how to apply the word of God. But these do not replace scripture, ladies and gentlemen. They just help us to understand and to apply the word of God. For example, this is me going to work. As I am going to work one day, with my bag, as I am going to work, on my way I meet a very big lion. As I am going to work, I meet a very big lion. As I am going to work, this is me, I meet a very big lion. Because I know how dangerous a lion is, I run for my life. It chases me, I run, and then I hide somewhere. And when I hide somewhere, that lion goes. This is me on my way to work. I meet a very huge lion. Because I know what a lion does, because I know a lion is dangerous, I start fearing. Because I know how dangerous a lion is, I start fearing. When I start fearing, the fight, flight, or freeze mode is activated in me. When it is activated, I run. When I run, I hide myself, and when I hide myself, the lion goes its way. Have you seen the event? As I'm going to work, I find a very huge lion. Because I know how dangerous a lion is, I start fearing. When I fear, the fight, flight, or freeze is activated in me. That is a protective mechanism. When we fear, when we fall into fear, the fight, flight, or freeze is activated in our body. Fight, the body says, the body activates that mechanism. Fight, flight, or freeze. The brain activates that mechanism. The fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, you either fight the threat if you can fight it, or flight, you run away, you flee, or freeze, you freeze if that threat can be resolved by freezing. So when I meet this lion, automatically the body activates the fight, flight, or freeze. Because a lion is dangerous, I run away and protect myself from the danger of the lion. Now, because I feared, fear is a terrifying experience. When you fear, it is painful. Because I met a lion once, the brain starts believing that there is a threat elsewhere, that I might find more lions all day, all the time, everywhere. So now what happens is, this is a one-time event. I met a lion once while I was going to work. If I wrongly interpret that event, fear can start shaping behaviors, because internally I might start believing that lions are everywhere and they might hurt me anytime. Because of a one-time event, I can start interpreting it as a global conclusion of all events. This is a wrong interpretation. It was a one-time event. I met a lion once while going to work. But what happens? The brain can start interpreting all events through that one experience. I met a lion once. Yes, it was dangerous. Yes, it almost killed me. Yes, I ran and I was safe. When I wrongly interpret this event, it can become like lions are everywhere and they are going to kill me. Lions are everywhere, so I must avoid them. Lions are everywhere, so I am not safe, ladies and gentlemen. So that is what fear does. Fear interprets neutral events as life threatening. Because of a one-time event, it generalizes it like it is how it will always be. I met a lion once, so the mind starts believing I will meet other lions, or lions are everywhere and they might hurt me anytime, so I am not safe. Fear says I am not safe. I am not safe. That is what fear says. I have met a lion once, but that wrong interpretation of the event can become like I will always be meeting lions, so I am not safe. What happens when I believe that I am not safe because I met a lion once? I start behaving like I will meet more other lions. I start behaving like lions are everywhere. I start behaving like lions will always come and they will attack me. What fear does here is I start avoiding moving. Avoidance. Because internally I believe when I move, when I walk around, I might find another lion. So I start avoiding walking around. I stop going to work because of a one-time event. This is what fear does. I start avoiding going to work because I met a lion once while I was going to work. So the mind interprets this one event. The mind uses the evidence of this one event to interpret all other events. I start staying at home. Why? Internally, I believe when the moment I walk out of this place, I might meet other lions and they will hurt me. This is fear. I start avoiding. I quit working. Because I believe when I go to work, I might face or I might meet lions or I might fall into lions and they will kill me. But this is a one-time event. The mind is using it to judge all things. So that is how fear works. Because of what happened once, it starts shaping my life. That is how fear works. Because I met a lion once, I eternally believe I will find lions everywhere else. So I am not safe. That is how fear works, ladies and gentlemen. So I will be giving more other examples so that we get to know how fear works. Remember, these two conditions, fear and shame, were activated in man. And because we are humans and we came from Adam and Eve, humans have tendencies of operating in fear and shame, and these shape behaviors, they shape our lives, ladies and gentlemen. These two conditions, fear and shame, they shape behaviors, they shape our lives, they shape how we see ourselves, they shape how we interact with with other people. Okay, one example here. I tried to find a job one day. This is how fear operates. I tried to find a job one day and I failed. let's say I put in all that I could, I did each and everything possible to get that job, and I failed. So when I fail, I might conclude internally that I am a failure. And then fear of failing starts shaping my behaviors. That is how fear operates. Because I failed once, the brain might interpret it as an event. It might interpret it as something that will happen again. In trying to avoid failing, it starts shaping behaviors. Let's say in this case, I have grown up in a poor family. I have grown up in a poor family where resources are scarce, where we do not have a lot of money. Yes, like we all know, poor families where resources are scarce, where there isn't enough resources. So my mind can internalize that resources are scarce. Now this is just an event that I've grown up in. Yes, there are very many situations, let's say, whereby parents came back and they did not have enough, whereby I needed certain things and they were not able to provide them. So because the resources are scarce, because there are no resources, because I see scarcity in resources, so I can internalize and generalize it that resources are scarce everywhere in the world. Resources are scarce everywhere in the world, even when it was just in my family. But I can internalize that resources are scarce everywhere in the world. The world does not have enough. So because I fear that the world does not have enough, so the brain says I am not safe because resources are not enough. So I am not safe. So now fear of scarcity. Fear of scarcity starts shaping my behaviors. I have grown up in a poor family where resources are scarce, but I internalize it that resources are scarce everywhere else in the world. The world does not have enough. Because I've grown up in an environment where resources are scarce, I generalize it. This is me now interpreting a neutral event as a global conclusion, as the global truth. One time event, according to our family, we did not have enough resources, but I generalize it that resources are scarce. The world does not have enough. What is here is what is elsewhere in the world. So fear of scarcity starts shaping my behaviors. For example, because I fear that resources are scarce, because I fear that there isn't enough in the world, so I believe I am not safe. I am not safe because the world does not have enough resources. This starts shaping behaviors. I become greedy. I become greedy. Why? Internally, I believe that when I gather enough, when I do each and everything possible and gather all things to me, then I will have enough. So in trying to gather as much as I can so that I am safe, in trying to gather as much as I can, I end up becoming greedy. So greed. I become greedy. Why? Internally, I believe when I gather enough, I will be safe. So fear of scarcity is now shaping my behaviors. Greed. I have become greedy because I believe when I gather enough, I will be safe. This is greed. I can become power hungry. What does a power-hungry person do? What does a power-hungry person do? When I believe resources are scarce, I try each and everything possible to have a position in power, let's say in government, whereby I can gather as much as I can, so I can become a politician, not because I want to serve, but because I want to gather what is enough, because internally I believe resources are scarce. So now fear of scarcity is shaping my behaviors. I can become stingy because I believe resources are scarce. So when I get something, I do not want to release it. When I get money, I do not want to release it, because I believe when I release what I have, I might not have anything else. When I let go of what I have, I might not have another. So fear of scarcity is now shaping my behaviors. I become stingy. I become a manipulator. Internally, I believe when I manipulate others, I can earn from them and gather enough, because I believe resources are scarce. So when I manipulate others, I can earn enough. I can become a thief. Not because I want to steal, but because internally I believe resources are scarce. So if there is any way that I can have money, be it good or bad, I can use that way to have money. So I end up becoming a thief. I can become a people pleaser. Why? Internally, I believe when I please others, I will earn from them. But what is shaping all this? Fear of scarcity. Because I wrongly interpreted an event. Yes, we grew up in a poor family. Yes, I grew up in a poor environment. But it does not mean resources are scarce everywhere in the world. It was just my family that did not have enough. It does not mean the world does not have enough. But when I interpret that event wrongly, I can start operating in fear. So fear of scarcity is now shaping my behaviors. So that is how fear works. I use the evidence of a one-time event to generalize each and everything else. So fear starts shaping my life. That is one example. Fear of scarcity. So that is how fear shapes lives, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, someone can internalize the fear of scarcity and they do not even know they internalize it. But externally, it starts shaping behaviors and we start operating in those behaviors, thinking this is who I am. I was born greedy. I was born a manipulator. I was born a liar. I was born stingy. I was born a thief. Fear of scarcity can lead to behaviors, ladies and gentlemen. Not only fear of scarcity, but all fears. You internalize and misinterpret an event, and that misinterpretation starts shaping behaviors. Man started knowing good and evil. One way we can understand knowing good and evil is interpreting events, interpreting the self according to the self. Man, the interpretation became self-referential. I interpret an event according to how I understand it, according to how I see it, according to what I know. This leads to wrong interpretation of events, and it as well leads to the wrong interpretation of the self. Okay. Remember, fear and shame are now active in man. So fear and shame can now shape how we interpret events. Have you seen how fear of scarcity is shaping how I interpret events? Have you seen how fear of scarcity is shaping my behaviors? That is what fear does.